Dawn came thin and blew over the pines, the kind of light that made every frost-laced branch look like glass. Smoke curled from a single chimney in the valley, Elias Boone's cabin, where silence had long ago taken up residence like a stubborn ghost. He was a man of few words, though the trees seemed to know his thoughts. Each swing of his axe echoed with something more than work, it was atonement, steady and rhythmic, carving a path through memory. He had once lived among laughter and cradle songs, but both had been taken by the same cruel winter years ago. His wife buried beneath frozen earth, his infant beside her. Since then, he spoke to no one unless he had to. The woods gave him all he needed, timber, solitude, and the slow forgetting of time. In town, they called him the hermit lumberjack, half with pity, half with fear. He didn't mind either. Gossip had no claws in a man who no longer felt he deserved warmth. That morning, as he shouldered his axe and stepped into the half-melted snow, something strange waited by his fence. A wagon, empty but for a shape beneath a blanket, stood crooked on one wheel. The horse was gone. The air had that taut stillness before a storm, and his first thought was of a corpse. But when he pulled back the blanket, he found a face instead. Pale, too thin, but alive. A woman. Her lips were cracked, her hair matted with dust. When her eyes fluttered open, they were the kind that remembered every mile of hardship. "Please," she rasped, clutching at her belly. He said you'd help." She held out a folded note, damp and torn. Elias hesitated before taking it. The handwriting was crude and hurried. "Sold her for safe passage. She's your problem now. Signed, Silas Hollis." The words hit him like a misfired bullet. Sold. As if she were stock, not flesh. He looked at her again, so young, trembling, the faint curve of pregnancy pressing against her coat. "You know this man?" he asked, voice gravelly from disuse. "My brother," she whispered, as though the word itself burned. He said I'd be safe here." Elias turned the note over in his hand, staring at the smudge of dirt where the ink had bled. There were men who could walk away from such a sight, leave the broken to fend for themselves. He had once been one of them. But something in her voice, a quiet thread of shame and stubborn will, snagged at the torn fabric of his heart. He lifted her gently from the wagon. She was lighter than she should have been. Inside his cabin, he laid her by the hearth and stoked the fire until it cracked and spat. Steam rose from her boots as they thawed. She watched him in wary silence, as if waiting for the price he'd demand. "Name?" he asked at last. "Clara May Hollis." "Well, Clara May, you'll rest here a while. I'll see you have broth, maybe a doctor from town." "I can't pay," she murmured. "I didn't ask." The wind sighed against the windowpane, and for a long time neither spoke. She drifted into uneasy sleep, her breath shallow, her hand curved protectively over her stomach. Elias sat by the fire, staring into the flames. He tried to feel nothing, no pity, no anger, but emotion has a way of slipping through the cracks a man doesn't patch. By morning, word had already spread through town. Miss Liddy Grant, keeper of the general store and all local rumors, had seen Elias ride in for medicine. By afternoon, the saloon was buzzing. "Boone's taken in a girl with a belly full o' trouble," they said. Sheriff Amos Pike came knocking that evening, hat in hand but suspicion in his eyes. "Folks are talking, Boone," he said. "They think you're keeping her for reasons that don't sit right." Elias's jaw flexed. "Let them talk." The sheriff studied him, saw the shadowed circles beneath his eyes, the defensive stillness in his stance. "You're a good man under all that bark," he said quietly. "Don't let her bring ruin down on you." When the door closed behind the sheriff, Elias stood there a long while. Clara May had woken, listening from the next room. "I'll leave if it causes trouble," she said softly. He turned toward her. "You're not leaving in your state. Folks' words can't freeze you out faster than this weather will." Something unspoken passed between them then, a fragile understanding, nothing more. She nodded and retreated to the hearth. He set about mending a broken chair leg, trying to busy his hands, but every creak of the cabin seemed louder now. The rhythm of his solitude had been broken, replaced by another heartbeat moving softly in the same room. Days slipped into a pattern. Elias chopped wood, Clara swept and mended what she could. She tried to keep from being a burden, though she winced when she moved. Once, when she reached for a kettle and nearly lost her balance, he caught her arm. The contact was brief but electric, like touching something forbidden yet achingly familiar. She pulled away, embarrassed. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded. "You're safe here." Safe. The word lingered. In a world that had bought and sold her safety, it sounded almost holy. One evening, while the fire dimmed to embers, she began to hum. A small tune, broken, but full of life. Elias froze mid-whittle, his knife hovering over the half-carved piece of pine. He hadn't heard song in years. It stirred memories best left buried, yet he couldn't tell her to stop. Instead, he listened. Later, when she had gone to rest, he studied the piece of wood in his hands. Without thinking, he shaped it into a cradle's curve, smoothing the edges until his fingers trembled. When he set it down, his breath caught. He hadn't meant to build anything but quiet, and yet here it was, the start of something that felt dangerously close to hope. Outside, the forest whispered, the trees creaking like old voices trading secrets. The air smelled of thawing earth and pine resin. He went to the door, looking toward the horizon where night gathered in slow folds. Somewhere out there, a man named Silas Hollis was spending the silver he'd earned from selling his sister's trust. Elias wondered what kind of world could make a brother do such a thing. Behind him, Clara stirred. "Can't sleep," she murmured. "Storm coming," he said. "Air's too still." She stepped closer to the window, watching lightning far off in the hills. "Feels like the world's holding its breath," she said. Elias nodded. "Maybe it is." The firelight caught their faces, his worn, hers weary but unbroken. In that fragile quiet, something in the room shifted, almost imperceptible. Not love, not yet, but the faint stirring of trust. The storm's first rumble rolled through the valley, low and distant, as if warning them both that the peace they'd found was only temporary. And though neither spoke it aloud, they knew, the world beyond those walls was coming for them soon. Spring arrived with mud and meltwater, the forest waking slow and reluctant. Elias Boone felt the season in his bones, the ache in his hands, the dampness that gathered in the seams of the cabin. Clara May's belly had grown round beneath her patched dress, and though she smiled more these days, he could see the worry flicker in her eyes when thunder rolled over the hills. She still dreamed of her brother, calling her name in the dark. Elias said little, but every time she woke gasping, he sat up in his chair until she settled again. Silence was the only comfort he knew how to give. The town had not forgiven them. Miss Liddy Grant's gossip spread like wildfire through dry brush. At the general store, Elias felt the weight of every stare, every half-muttered word about sin and scandal. Sheriff Pike did his best to quiet talk, but tongues were sharper than law. Still, Elias endured. He gathered supplies, nodded curtly to the sheriff, and rode home through rain and pine, telling himself it didn't matter what they said. But deep down, he knew the world never let a man forget his loneliness, nor a woman her shame. By May, the baby's time was near. Clara May could no longer walk far, so she spent her mornings on the porch, breathing the wild air and letting sunlight fall on her hands. Elias built her a rocking chair, his craftsmanship careful and spare. She thanked him with a look that lingered longer than words could. Between them hung a quiet tenderness, something like love, though neither dared name it. Then one evening, as the sun sank red behind the ridge, a rider came up the trail. Elias saw the dust first, then the silhouette, lean, crooked, familiar. A chill crawled up his spine before the name even reached his tongue. Silas Hollis. The man dismounted with a swagger that stank of whiskey and pride. His hat was torn, his boots mud-caked, but his grin was the same cruel line Clara had described in fragments. "Well, ain't this cozy," he drawled, eyes flicking from the cabin to the porch where Clara froze, one hand to her belly. "My sweet sister found herself a husband after all." Elias stepped forward, voice low. "You've got no business here." Silas chuckled. "No business? She's my blood. You think you can just keep her, keep what's mine, like some prize calf?" He spat in the dirt, eyes narrowing. "I heard the town talkin'. You've been playin' family out here. Thought I'd come collect my due." Clara's face drained of color. "Silas, please. You sold me. You made your choice." He turned on her, venom in his grin. "I made a trade, not a choice. You owe me, girl. And now that fool's cuttin' timber worth more than both our hides. Maybe it's time you paid back your debt." Elias moved closer, calm but unyielding. "You'll turn your horse and ride out. There's nothing here for you." Silas's hand twitched near his holster, though no gun gleamed there, only the ghost of one. He wasn't a man of bullets, his weapons were words and desperation. "You'd kill me over her?" he sneered. Elias's eyes darkened. "I don't kill, not anymore." That answer seemed to amuse him. "Not anymore," Silas repeated, mocking. "Then maybe I'll just take what's owed and leave you with your conscience." Before he could move, Clara stepped between them, trembling but fierce. "You'll take nothing from me ever again, Silas Hollis." Her voice cracked like dry timber. "You sold me for whiskey, for a ride west, for nothing. That's what I was worth to you. Well, here's the truth, you lost me that day." For a heartbeat, no one moved. The wind stirred pine needles, carrying the scent of rain. Then Silas lunged, grabbing her arm. Elias was faster, his rough hands wrenched Silas back, forcing him to stumble. The man struck out wildly, but Elias didn't fight back, he only held him there, eyes burning with a sorrow deeper than anger. "You don't belong here," he said. "Not in this cabin, not in her life." Silas spat, struggling, until the sound of hooves broke through the clearing. Sheriff Pike rode up, rifle slung across his saddle, face grim. "I figured I'd find you here, Hollis," he said. "You're wanted in 3 towns for theft and fraud." Silas's grin faltered. "You got nothin' on me." The sheriff dismounted. "I got witnesses, and I got reason. You can come quiet, or I'll see you come hard." For once, Silas had no clever words left. He glared at his sister, at Elias, and spat in the dirt again. "You think this is over? You think a man like me disappears?" Clara's voice was soft but steady. "Yes, Silas. You already have." Pike bound his wrists, led him to the horse, and soon their figures vanished down the trail, swallowed by the trees. When silence returned, it was a different kind of silence, cleansed, raw, full of something almost holy. That night, thunder rolled again, just as it had months before. The storm came quick, fierce. Clara's cries broke through the noise, and Elias knew the baby was coming. He moved with quiet purpose, boiling water, fetching towels, steadying her hand when she clenched against the pain. Hours stretched like days, until finally a cry, thin, fierce, alive, split the dark. Clara collapsed back, tears mixing with sweat. Elias stared at the child, small and perfect in her arms. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, softly, "He's strong." She smiled through exhaustion. "I want to name him Will." Elias blinked. "For the man who'll tell our story?" She nodded faintly. "For the one who'll remember that kindness can grow in barren soil." Outside, the storm eased into a steady rain. The world smelled new again. Days later, the gossip in town softened. Miss Liddy said she'd misjudged Boone, and the sheriff told anyone who'd listen that decency still lived in hard places. Elias didn't care much for talk, but he noticed how the forest sounded different, less lonely somehow. Clara would sit on the porch with baby Will, the rocking chair creaking slow and sweet. Sometimes Elias would pause his work just to listen to the rhythm of their breathing, as if it tethered him to life again. When dusk fell, he'd light the lamp and watch shadows move across the floorboards, thinking of all that had passed, the fear, the shame, the forgiveness neither had asked for yet both had found. One evening, as fireflies stitched light through the dark, Clara turned to him. "Do you ever think about leaving?" He looked toward the woods. "Not anymore. There's things worth staying for." Her smile was quiet, understanding. The baby stirred, cooing, and she rocked him gently until he slept. The night around them was wide and still, the world balanced on the edge of something fragile and new. Elias stood in the doorway, watching her silhouette against the lamplight, and felt a strange peace settle in his chest. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, storms, judgment, or grace, but for the first time in years, he wanted to find out. Beyond the cabin, the forest whispered like an old friend, and somewhere, faint and distant, thunder rolled again, no longer a warning, but a reminder that even after ruin, the sky could still open to rain.